Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to All Together, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargent. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Fostering, the act of providing temporary care to children in need, while indeed noble, can prove to be an extremely complex journey. It requires a particular blend of compassion, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. So in this episode, we'll be examining this multifaceted experience, taking a look at the challenges and triumphs in fostering, and exploring what it means to build support in such circumstances. And to guide us through this conversation today is social work professor Julie Cederbaum, currently at the University of Southern California's Dworak-Peck School of Social Work. Julie's area of expertise spans from family dynamics to childhood adversity. So it's a great honor to have her here with us today. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thanks for having me, Marie.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the show. So before we begin, tell us about what sparked your interest in the area of parenthood and social work.
Yeah, I think I was really lucky to start my social work clinical practice career working with families and just realized how important the dynamics of family is to the well-being of children. And to work with either the parent or the child independently felt like you were missing a bigger piece to the puzzle. And so I have really had a career both clinically and in research that's focused on both the parent and the child as a dynamic dyad.
Yeah, well, that's really great to hear. So before we get further into detail, could you tell us about, could you give us a brief preface as to what we'll be talking about today? Give us an idea of what some common misconceptions about fostering that you've heard.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be having the opportunity to talk about this in depth. I think that there are a lot of challenges that come with fostering, but also a lot of misconceptions. I think people go into it thinking that they're saving kids who are in need, when really it's about providing stability and support for kids who may have a need temporarily or may have that need more long term. The context of my knowledge is really in the US. And one of the great misconceptions, I think, is that about a third to half of all children in foster care are actually living with relatives. And I think that often we think of foster care as children removed to live with families that they don't know. But I think it's really important to recognize that extended family is really a significant part of the foster care system.
Yeah, well, that's a great introduction for our topic for today. And I'd love to discuss this further in detail. But before that, I'd love to get to know you better. So this is Have You Met Julie? And my first question for you is, what do you like to do in your spare time?
My favorite thing to do is be out in the mountains and hike. Here in Southern California, we have pretty temperate, beautiful weather. And so we can spend most of the year out and about outdoors. So really enjoying nature and kind of shaking off the city and enjoying both the sun and the trees.
Oh, that's really nice. The mountains are beautiful.
It's a nice place to be.
Yeah. And do you read any books or watch any films or TV shows?
Yes. So I'm an avid reader, probably about a book a week. And I find that this is a great balance, particularly fiction, to kind of some of the hard work we do in our professions. And so I have, so many great books. I'm currently reading a novel called The Council of Dolls by Mona Susan Power. I made sure to bring it just so that I could think about it. Wanted to give the author credit, which is about a multi-generational Native American family here in the U.S. And so I think that there's an amazing amount of literature in the world, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to lose some time in it.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about that book. What is it about? What is it about it? What about it do you find to be particularly memorable?
Yeah, I think it's the portrayal of multiple generations of women within a family over a historical period of time and kind of the intergenerational patterns that occur, but also gives us, good history and grounding to the experience of Native Americans in the United States.
Yeah, it's always really nice when a fictional book weaves in some historical elements to it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's the best way to, debunk misconceptions or to increase people's awareness. So I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
and yeah, I always love piece. I always love a fictional piece of work that has some kind of nonfiction element to it. It's always it because you like the aspect of losing and immersing yourself in the piece of work, but at the same time learning non-fictional things along the way. So yeah, I think that sounds like a great book. But yeah, so in your personal life or your professional life, is there anyone that you look up to in particular?
I thought a lot about this. I think that in the end, my choice would be women like Gloria Steinem or other individuals who have devoted their life to advocacy, to living their values, to living what's ethical, to work towards equity. Dolores Huerta would be another example, but there's just a plethora of women leaders that I think have really guided my thinking about how I want to live in the world and the way that you can live in the world so that it's better, hopefully, when you leave it than when you found it or when you arrived.
Yeah, it's amazing how they paved the way for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing more about yourself. I really enjoyed my time, but I think it's a good point to go into what we'll be talking about today, which is the challenges and triumphs of fostering. But for starters, what do you think a family is?
This is an interesting question because family can be identified as biological relationships, but also family can be created. So I think to me, family is the constellation of people you have around you that provide you with, support, meet your needs, and those might be emotional, those might be physical. But I think that family can have a lot of different definitions, and I appreciate kind of living in our current world where most of those definitions are acceptable and allows space to think beyond the biological family is the only way for a
Yeah.
family to be formed.
Yeah, and in your view, where do you see the position of a family in today's society? Does it still hold the same importance as how it did decades ago?
I believe family is always kind of the critical linchpin of society. And that's because it's, at least when we're very young, kind of where we spend the most time are the people we spend the most time with. And so this is where we're doing our learning. This is where we're getting, adults are role modeling to kids, where we can kind of see the world through different lenses, potentially provide opportunities. I think that there was a time in which, in I would say my generation, even of individuals that kind of when you were 18, you were meant to kind of leave and be on your own, and success meant kind of not returning home. I think the economics of the world and the dynamics of the world, I think, have changed. And we've realized that that isn't maybe what's best for people, right? That kind of having support, particularly during transitions, is really important. And that, there are different needs as we age, right? Our parents or our families serve different roles at different times in our lives and in different ways. And so I think families is critical. And I hope that, our goal and the conversation today is really talking about strengthening families and seeing the strengths and benefits of families and families changing. So yes, I think families are central and critical.
For sure. And more specific to today's topic, how would you define foster care?
I'm going to speak from the U.S. context, but foster care is generally, a temporary support for children who are unable to currently reside with their family or family of origin, which generally is identified as a parent, a mother or father. And I say temporary because in the United States, our goal is reunification, right? Our goal is to help strengthen families, support parents and children to reunify, and not to remove children permanently from their family systems. Um, you know, I don't- it, should that happen and the track be adoption, that's kind of a separate, and kind of secondary step that happens. But I think foster care looks different. It may be a home base with a family or relative. It may be in a home with a non-caregiver relative, but a caregiver that has, been trained to be a foster parent, or and much less likely these days and much less common, but in the past for sure has included also group homes and other kind of congregate care settings, particularly for older youth where perhaps there weren't families available to take in older kids. So I think there is no one size fits all, and there's no one type of foster care. And I think most kids in foster care you wouldn't even know because they're, residing within family systems that look as typical as someone who's not in foster care.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I admittedly had no real frame of reference as to what foster care looked like, just because I've never really known anybody within my circle. So this is really interesting to me. And does fostering affect the dynamics of biological and foster families at all?
I think the answer is yes. I think, and I speak to this as having been a social worker with families who had children removed and reunited, but also just as a parent myself. And I have not experienced being part of the child welfare or foster care system, but I can imagine the feeling of being separated from my child. I think even parents who are having challenges, and even when it's in the best interest of the child, maybe to spend time outside of living with their family because there's challenges happening within the family system, it doesn't mean that the parents aren't trying to do the best they can. And it doesn't mean that they don't love their child, right? There may be mental health issues, there may be substance use issues, there may be intimate partner violence. There are a lot of constellations of challenges that arise that tend to create the dynamic challenges that result in kids being removed from the home. So I think it's very hard for the parent, the biological parent. No parent wants to fail. And I think that that's always a challenge. And so there's shame that comes with that. And there's anger and resentment that comes with that towards the system or towards individuals who might have interfered, quote unquote, in the process. And then I think there's also, really dynamic and different emotions that the child's going to go through. Even sometimes when our family of origin households are challenging, it doesn't mean we don't love and feel strongly connected to our parents. So being removed from the parent, while sometimes can be a relief for a child, right? Because they're in a safer, maybe more calm or regulated or stable situation. There may be guilt for feeling that way. And it may be also hard to you may miss your parent. I mean, right? This is the person you've been living with, and now you're in a completely new environment. And so I think that's a challenge. And then on the flip side, for a foster parent, particularly those who know that they may just have this child temporarily, there's the balance of connecting and being that safe port in the storm for children, but also recognizing that your job is to be a temporary, safe, supportive adult, and that, you need to give them all the love and care that they deserve, and also recognize that, that the best thing for them is likely to return to their family of origin. And so this is going to be temporary. So I think that can create challenges too. And I think there's disappointment among foster parents when parents of origin, or the parent that's had the child removed isn't meeting what they're supposed to have the child returned. So I think the foster parent can feel stress or strain or disappointment towards the parent or the biological parent if they feel like that's hurting the child.
Yeah, that sounds really harsh on all sides. But from what you've seen, do cultural and societal factors influence the experience of foster families at all?
Yeah, I think we can think about this kind of from a multi-layered, kind of more ecological perspective. So there are all of us as individuals have kind of intrinsic qualities that make us who we are. And so I think it's important to think about foster care, that it's going to be a unique experience for every individual who's going through it. So there's no one size fits all. But we know there's personality characteristics that may make me more resilient or have different, better emotional coping, problem solved coping as the child in that situation or as the parent in that situation. And then there are going to be family system dynamics, right? There's kind of the next level out where, you know, kind of sorting out what it is to live in a new family and kind of understand the roles and dynamics within that family. So those may be real strengths, right? Again, stability. Or there may be some challenges in that process because it's completely new. And then I always really like to lean on adults outside of the family system. I think teachers are really important, mentors, coaches, the social worker themselves who's involved, therapists, anybody who's part of, the folks through faith institutions or, if folks are connected to kind of worship. And all these people become this support kind of network and safety net for kids and families. And so, and then, lastly is kind of policies, right? So we in our countries have to make policies that are supportive of young people and supportive of families and supportive of, people who are experiencing challenges and for the adults who step in during those times. So I think we really want to think about this from lots of levels. And oftentimes it's the policies that become the challenge on the individual, right? And so kind of continuing to advocate for, policies that again work to strengthen and reunite families, I think is really critical.
Yeah. And what would you say are the unique challenges commonly faced by foster families?
Yeah, I think that it's the change in dynamics. I think you may be a foster family who has biological children in the home, and now there's a child coming in from outside of that system. And, I think about the concept of like family homeostasis, right? Like families have their dynamic, they have their roles, they have the way that they know how to function. And this is adding a new person creates a change in the dynamic, and it kind of jostles everybody around while they're trying to figure out kind of what their roles are and what that means. And so, it was described to me once best that, imagine waking up from sleep and being in a place you don't know with a language that you don't speak. And that's some of the experience of being a child removed from their home and put with a foster family, right? So they're trying to navigate a whole new environment that they don't have any context for. And so it's learning family roles and kind of the dynamics of family and roles. And so I think that's all part of some of the bumps and challenges that come specifically with the introduction of a youth and a new child into the home.
Yeah. And what is advice for overcoming them?
I think that there's a number of things we can think about, but really it's how do we build networks to help us kind of find support in the process. I think that often both children independently from adults feel isolated and alone, that nobody else is going through this experience. And so connecting with peers that are also going through these experiences, I think is really critical to just normalizing the experience and having a space to be able to talk about things separate from, talking to your foster parent or foster child about it, right? Kind of a more neutral person to do that with or people to do that with. I also think that we really need to lean on empathy, right? Recognizing as the adult that, again, that, anything that comes up for that child really needs to be led with empathy, and that you can hold boundaries and have rules. But what this child needs more than anything is to know that they're safe and that they're loved and that they're welcome. And so, and then the last thing I would say, and I would say this about parenting in general, but it's being honest when things are hard and asking for help. I think that oftentimes people think I've taken on a role, I was trained, I should be capable and competent, and I don't want anybody to perceive me as failing. And so I'm not going to let people know I'm having a hard time. And I think that really can lead to compassion fatigue and potentially burnout, and that can be really dangerous to the family dynamic. And so really just being honest that parenting is hard. Parenting in any situation is hard. and that we all need support, and that when we're honest with our experience, we actually create an environment where that support can be given to us.
Yeah. And on the other hand, what unique challenges do foster children particularly usually experience?
And this is a great question. I mean, there may be emotional or behavioral issues or challenges that arise. And, that might be because, again, I'm in a new place, or I don't know how to express myself, or my form of expression is complicated because either of age, verbal abilities, the amount of trauma I've had, and what I'm comfortable sharing. Um, I think it's really important to remember that, then grief and loss are part of this process for kids. That's, again, what was happening in the family of origin may have been challenging, but it doesn't mean that they wanted to be separated from their parent. They just wanted that situation to be better, right? So really recognizing that grief is going to be, and loss is going to be part of the process. And I think it's just adjustment, like really recognizing that, oftentimes kids are having to switch schools. They're switching neighborhoods. They're out of everything that they know. And so that there's a huge adjustment period, and that adjustment for any of us can be bumpy, even under the best of circumstances. But for kids who have also experienced a number of challenges and potentially trauma, that we, again, need to lead with empathy and really recognize that that's going to be a particular challenge for this group. And it is likely going to look different than challenges experienced by our own biological children in our families of origin.
Yeah. And what does leading with empathy look like?
Yeah, I think it's patience. I think it's thinking about the way that we interact, our presence with children, right? So I always talk to parents about kind of putting the phone down, but just being wholly present for this child. And I think, reserving our expectations, again, which doesn't mean not having boundaries or rules, but what we might have expected from, our biological children. Let me start again. Our biological children have been with us since they were born. And so we have had the whole period of their life to socialize them into the family expectations and roles, or the expectations I have of them in terms of how they behave, or, we can kind of fill in the blanks. A new child coming into the home doesn't have any context for that. And so I think parents have to be really mindful. Foster parents need to be mindful that they're not having the same expectation for this new child that they have for their current children, or if they have biological children in the home, or even a former foster child that they had, right? That this child is different and may have their own adjustment needs. So I do think, some of the parenting skills of praise, attending, I think are really important. But leading with empathy really is about patience, recognizing that things, not personalizing when things aren't going well, and not feeling it, again, acknowledging and asking for support when needed, so that you don't, have compassion fatigue, and which interferes with being able to be empathetic.
Yeah, I just imagine, like, for example, a foster kid acting up, or expressing rudeness. Well, not to say that it's justified, but it's more of just like they were never taught that in their own homes. So, you know, taking that and making it personal is just kind of like, this is a kid. This is a kid who has gone through so much. You can't take that and go like, oh, this kid just hates me or something like that, which like maybe they think they do at that point. But it's more of just like they don't, yeah, like you said, they don't have any context for that or how to act. So yeah, that seems like a really important point. And when it comes to connection and support, it seems like a very vital component for any functioning family. So, how would you describe its role in foster families? What's the importance there?
Oh, I think it's the foundation, honestly. You just gave the example of a kid acting out, and sometimes that's a test, right? And
Mhm.
I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean Are you still going to care about me? Are you still going to, want me to be here, even if we haven't talked about developmental context, but this isn't, some teenagers just generally do this. I live with two teenagers, so I'm well aware of this kind of pushing. But that's really true, right? So it's going to look really different if you're talking about a kid who's under 5, an infant versus a toddler versus a school age kid versus a teen, right? And that might be the amount of time that they've been exposed to, family challenges, but also, and the patterns they've gone into to deal with the stressors in their lives. But also some of it is just kind of testing to figure out who I am and how I function in the world, which for teenagers is, a typical part of development. And so I think that, again, just, leading with empathy is really about being stable, about being grounded, saying, I know you're angry right now, but, you are important and we care about you. And here's the reason that this is happening. And you may want to walk away right now and you may be angry, but I'm going to still be here when you're, want to talk again. And really just, letting that child know that you're going to do everything in your power to ensure that they're not failed.
Yeah, that sounds completely reasonable. But apart from just showing empathy, are there other ways that foster parents can try and build that strong connection with foster children? Or, from what I envision, it's really difficult to force a child or a teenager to do something that they don't want to do. So what can be done there?
Yeah, I think some of it's tapping into and trying to figure out what it is that child likes. What is fun for them? What do they enjoy doing? So, not only are they adjusting to our dynamics, but we're also learning about them and giving them opportunities to lead, to teach. I think, engaging in activities as often as you can, whether that's going to the park, whether that's going on a hike, perhaps they've never learned to ride a bike. Perhaps they, going to a museum, there's a lot of what going to the beach. And it depends where you live and kind of what's around. But I think bonding activities, things that create shared fun experiences together can all help build attachment. Also just being present. So, this idea of attending, we often talk about it with younger kids, right? That's about kind of coming up with an activity and doing it one-on-one with that child and really kind of being intentional about it. And it may be that you do that, you make dinner together, you play a game together. I think about when my kids were younger and, kind of the routine of bath, and then we read 3 books and then they went to bed, right? Kind of having routines, creating routines can be really helpful. Things that are predictable. I think when you are a kid who've been in a family dynamic where maybe things weren't so predictable, having consistency and predictability can really build that. I also think about things that adults can do to reduce stressors or anxiety for children who have been removed from families or who they're fostering. So an example I can think of is, somebody's running late to pick a child up from school. Perhaps if it's my biological child, they know, my mom comes every day. She picks me up. She must be running late. If I was fostering a child, I would call. I would ask to put the child on the phone. I would say, I'm running late. I'm in traffic, but know that I am coming. I will be there in, 10 minutes. You're not being left. I will be there. And I am so sorry that I'm running late. And, know that I'm going to do my best not to have this happen again. Right. So I think creating, again, that safety, being a good communicator, and all these things help provide that stability, that sense of stability that kids really need and yearn for, that can really support kind of the well-being of the child you're fostering.
Yeah. And when it comes to maintaining relationships with biological families, what is the appropriate amount of communication there, or of relationship maintenance?
Sure. It's interesting. I think some of it's really dependent on the the situation and why the child was removed and the stipulations on the parent. So oftentimes that's set by the child welfare system. That's not set by the child or the foster family. And so, particularly with the person from whom the child has been removed. But in terms of extended family, I know in the work that I've done with older youth transitioning out of the foster care system, many of them have maintained relationships with grandparents, with aunts and uncles, with cousins. Sometimes siblings aren't living together. So I think it's important that just because those folks might not have been able to take that child in to live with them, doesn't mean that they don't provide support, that they aren't important, and that they, shouldn't, that those relationships shouldn't be facilitated. So again, to me, a foster family is kind of a bonus family, right? Like it's not that the child doesn't have a family. In most cases, the child will have family or extended family, but perhaps just not someone who can support, raising them or having them live with them even during the time where their parent or other caregiver can't. And so, it's important to, again, to me, think of themselves as kind of a bonus and to fit into the larger family system. And if that biological family system falls off on their own, then that's, kind of a different situation. But I would always recommend that the foster parents facilitate, even when it's hard, facilitate at least what they're expected to, but also kind of think about having that be child-led, that if it's important to the child to be communicating with their grandparent, that you have them communicating with their grandparent. Often that person, didn't do anything, and they are the biological family, and they are important parts of this child's life. And the idea of fostering is not to cut this child out of everything that they know, but rather, again, provide a stable supportive system while the child's family is having challenges.
Yeah, completely. And we've been talking a lot about the challenges of the foster system and being in a foster family and how to overcome those. But we actually haven't touched on the triumphs yet. So do tell us from what you've seen about what the upsides of being a foster family are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, kids are incredible. So I think having the opportunity to be an important adult in the life of a child should, in my opinion, always be seen as an opportunity. And there are kids who, particularly some who came from really challenging environments, who, once they're in a safe and stable environment, are absolutely thriving. I mean, it's quite incredible. And so I think providing kids, again, with that safe foundation allows them to flourish in 100 other ways, right? Like maybe it's creativity, maybe it's through sports, maybe it's in the making of friends and being part of communities. I think about some of the families I worked with, and they moved so often that kind of maintaining stable connections wasn't always feasible. And so kind of being able to build stable connections within their communities and friends and support networks. I think that, families who allow a larger community into their life and create kind of a wider kind of network, again, for youth and for themselves, create all sorts of opportunities to just meet new people and to be in new environments. And I've seen that be a tremendous strength to both parents and to children, both independently and as a collective. And so, again, those are peer supports, as well as just kind of engagement in a larger community, whether that's in your neighborhood or through, different organizations. I think about some of the youth who I know who have gone to college, and in the US, at least in California, I should say, I don't know if it's US wide. In California, we have something called the Guardian Scholars Program, which is set up for kids who have come out of foster care, who are now in college. And these are across all the colleges in the state and universities in the state. And that is a hub, right? There's resources for these young people, but also helps them build a community and helps them stay connected to supportive adults within a university environment. I think sometimes we forget about kids who are, leaving the family system, right? Like a typical kid transitioning from the home into a university setting, college age student. The typical child has family to return to during the holidays, or they have places to go when the university closes. A lot of our foster kids don't have that, right? So perhaps they have a foster family who remains in their lives, and I hope that that's true and continues to provide support. But also recognizing that we need to set these kids up to have to build relationships and strong relationships with other adults outside a family system, so that they can be supported throughout their life, and build positive and healthy relationships that can help do that. So I think the other perspective is just to think about how powerful it is that you as an adult can provide a loving environment and love to a child who really needs it during probably the hardest time of their life. And what a gift that is to give somebody.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it sounds like, the reward of just being able to help a child who's really in need of it. Um, it sounds great on its own, and there's nothing much more that you should be hoping out of it, right? So it sounds like it's the perfect time to talk about some practices and habits. So what is a habit that you recommend practicing to maintain and build and maintain a bridge of support within the foster families?
I think communication is essential. And so whether that is family therapy, whether that's individual therapy, whether that's talking to peers, whether that's talking to, other supports you have outside of your family system, again, being honest, asking for what you need, and recognizing that for all those benefits you just beautifully noted, there are also going to be challenges, because parenting is challenging, and so kind of recognizing that that's going to be a natural balance. But communication is also critical within the family system. It's how kids know what the expectations are in the family. It's how kids know how you feel. It's how you model as the adult that behavior, so that kids know how to undertake it. And so I think, people are going to do that in different ways. I'm someone who really believes in externalized communication, meaning talking out loud to people. But for some others, it may be journaling, it may be mindfulness practices, or meditation, I think. But it's just, staying grounded, recognizing when you're starting to feel challenged, and asking for and modeling the need to ask for support when we need it. I think
Yeah.
about this a lot with
Yeah.
with my own children. And if I don't show that I'm fallible, if I don't show that my feelings are hurt, or that sometimes I'm frustrated, or sometimes I'm sad, how do they know that it's okay to show their feelings? And so I really think that that's really important also within families. It's just kind of modeling behavior,
Yeah.
healthy emotions, healthy emotional
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah, it sounds like self-reflection is also very important, because when you're talking about being extremely communicative to foster kids, it's really important to actually take the time to think, in what ways are you being communicative? Because everybody's level of communication is kind of different. And we may be communicative in the sense of creating boundaries and being like, hey, in this house, we try not to do this, and these are the rules, and these are the expectations. But you may not be communicating that this child is still going to be cared for and loved, um, even if they do break the rules occasionally. And being reprimanded doesn't mean a lack of love or anything at all, that sort of stuff. But yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was all incredible information and incredible insights, and I learned so much from you. The last question I actually have for you is, how do you think practicing this level of communication would affect someone's parenting or perception of life?
Yeah, I think that, when we have the opportunity to foster a child, we have an opportunity to learn a lot about ourselves, right? So I think the benefit is bi-directional. We really have maybe the style we've communicated in prior doesn't work for this person. Maybe we need to think about different ways that we do things. But what I have found generally in families is that when we're not communicating verbally, often others in the family system will fill in the blanks. They perceive something, they, fill in maybe something that's totally wrong or erroneous about what we were thinking or how we were feeling. And so telling people how you feel or what's going on or how you feel about them or about a behavior, I think is really important. And it shows, again, it helps particularly a child kind of read you and understand what you want and what you mean and what you need and how you feel and that you love and that you care. So I think, communication is critical just to the functioning of the family. And I think ultimately what it does is it strengthens relationships. And that is critical. That relationship satisfaction or the parent-child connectedness is really important for well-being of both children and adults throughout their lifespan. It leads to better mental health. It leads to better emotional regulation. And so, again, it's that reminder that just because it works for one person doesn't mean the same method is going to work for someone else. And so being flexible and trying different things and modeling and not assuming that the child knows what you think or what you mean, but rather that you're verbalizing. And whether it's within a foster family system or just family systems in general, I think that is the most effective ways for families to be better attached and to feel more connected to one another.
That's wonderfully said. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's been such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Now let's move on to the open mic section. This is your opportunity to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is entirely yours, Julie. Take it away.
Oh, well, I am really passionate about the field of social work, and I hope that, others are inspired to make change in the lives of others through making the world more just and equitable, for serving as advocates. I feel so, lucky to have found a profession and an academic discipline that's so values driven and so ethics oriented. And I just hope that others feel compelled to be change makers as I have.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you once again, Julie, for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
Sure. I, as you had noted earlier, am at the University of Southern California in the Dworak-Peck School of Social Work. My email is jcederba@usc.edu. Happy to field emails and respond to those who might have questions. I can also be found on their website if you want to know more about me.
Amazing. We'll link those in the show notes. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you so much, Marie.
You've been listening to All Together, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by the Family Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at fa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargent. Thanks for tuning in.